According to legend, between 1817 and 1821, the family of John William Bell Sr. of northwest Robertson County was ceaselessly tormented by the so-called Witch of Mary Catherine Williams Bats. Natural readers of the stories will assume it was Kate's ghost that caused havoc in the family. However, she didn't pass away until sometime after 1840, too long after the activity in the house. In some aspects, the events seem more like poltergeist activity, but the often overlooked appearance of strange animals might indicate that familiar spirits had something to do with the phenomenon. In 1820, military officer John R. Bell, who wasn't related to the family in question, returned from an expedition of the Central Great Plains, and on October 19 crossed the Red River at Port Royal, Tennessee, and had dinner with at the Murphy residence in Robertson County. His diary documented the conversation once it turned to the Bell haunting, saying that a voice accompanied two of Jack's children, Elizabeth Bell and Howell and Drury Bell, giving the first written documentation of the phenomenon.
A remarkable occurrence which attracted widespread interest was connected with the family of John Bell, who settled near what is now Adams Station about 1804. So great was the excitement that people came from hundreds of miles around to witness the manifestations of what was popularly known as the Bell Witch. This witch was supposed to be some spiritual being, having the voice and attributes of a woman. It was invisible to the eye, yet it would hold conversation and even shake hands with certain individuals. The freaks it performed were wonderful and seemingly designed to annoy the family. It would take the sugar from the bowls, spill the milk, take the quilts from the beds, slap and pinch the children, and then laugh at the discomfiture of its victims. At first, it was supposed to be a good spirit, but its subsequent acts, together with the curses with which it supplemented its remarks, proved the contrary. A volume might be written concerning the performances of this wonderful being, as they are now described by contemporaries and their descendants. That all this actually occurred will not be disputed, nor will a rational explanation be attempted. It is merely introduced as an example of superstition, strong in the minds of all, but a few in those times, and not yet wholly extinct.
In January 1856, the Saturday Evening Post article, "The Tennessee Ghost," documented the supposed ghost saying,
It had made its appearance in Robertson County, Tennessee, some 30 years ago, or upwards, at the house of an old Mr. Bell, hence I called it the Tennessee Ghost, or perhaps I had better call it the Bell Ghost raised, as it seemed to have visited his house on account of a daughter he had familiarly called Miss Betsy Bell. It was in the form of a voice speaking in different parts of the house. It generally, as ghosts are wont to do, manifested itself only in the night, and if I was not mistaken, the lights had all to be put out before Tit would speak. It would be heard sometimes in one part of the house, and sometimes in another, moving about from the floor, under the floor and the walls, to the beds, open space in the midst of the house, and the roof. The ghost would converse freely with persons, and such was the excitement it created, that the house was constantly thronged with persons from all parts of the country, parent coming even 50 miles or more to hear it. When asked how long it was going to remain, it would reply until Joshua Gardner and Betsy Bell get married. Mr. Gardner was a very likely young man who resided in the neighborhood, and with whom the writer of this subsequently became well acquainted. Such was the number of people who thronged the house, night after night, that they came near eating old Mr. Bell out of house and home, but the thing could not last always. The spell of enchantment was destined to be broken. It turned out that Miss Betsy Bell was a ventriloquist part had, from some circumstance, became aware of the possession of such powers. Pan had fallen in love with Mr. Gardner, and wished him to marry her Pan, and had fallen upon this plan to bring about matrimonial union. But Joshua Gardner and Betsy Bell never married, and the ghost at length vanished into thin air, as is generally the end of all ghosts. There are numbers now living in Robertson County and elsewhere who heard this ghost and were well acquainted with the circumstances.
This article omitted the earlier documentation of thrill-seeking visitors posing questions to the voice in Nashville's Centennial Exposition. In 1880, it was documented that the so-current called witch that haunted the Bell family could appear as a rabbit, a black bear, and a black hound. It went on to say that the voice could imitate the sounds of various animals and gave 3 names to itself, saying at different times that its name was either Three Waters, Tanapurti, or Black Dog.
This mysterious, invisible, loquacious something is said to have manifested itself at the house of John Bell in vicinity on Red River in the north, western part of this county in the year 1818, and to have continued its marvelous and unwelcome visitations until the death of Mr. Bell and his wife. The story of the Witch of Endor, as related in the scriptures, did not create much more excitement than did the witch at Bell's. So great was the excitement that people came from at least a half-dozen states to see, or rather to hear, the sayings of this mysterious being. It would be impossible to relate a moiety of what it is reported to have said. Indeed, some of its language was so profane and vulgar as to preclude its recital here. Its first manifestations were made by pulling off the bedclothes and scratching on the bed tick to pull the daubing out of the cracks of the house and sprinkling it in the middle of the floor. Then it told in a low tone that it was a deceased spirit, and that it had come to have some skull bones which had been taken from a mound nearby on the river bluff, and that it would not cease its visits until the skulls were returned to their resting places. Although the skulls had been carefully deposited in their original graves, yet the witch came again when asked why it had come. Again it said, to let the family know where it had, when in the flesh, deposited a quantity of gold. Search was made for the gold at the place designated, but was not found, though diligent search was made. It would slap and spank a 12-year-old girl, a daughter of Mr. Bell, Ben, so much so that the signs of the fingers were made on the flesh of the girl being sent off to avoid the chastising. The witch followed her, and took her from between a man and his wife, rolling them off. It not only spoke audibly several different languages, but would touch hands with those of the neighborhood whom it deemed honorable. It would tell what had transpired in the vicinity for a distance of 7 or more miles round, narrating the intimacies of men and their wives, as well as disclosing the intrigues of men and women who deemed their liaisons unknown to any but themselves. It would unlock the door of the dwelling, although the key was in the lock and held by a stout man without turning the key. In making its approach, it would first be heard striking the roof of the house with a brush or limb of a tree. Then it would be heard to drop, as it were, from the rafters to the second floor, and then on the first, making as loud a noise as would any large man. It would talk and laugh, making ludicrous remarks about the damned fools that would come to see the witch. It would call the dogs and set them upon passers-by, to the great annoyance of the family as well as the neighbors. It would even take the tobacco out of the mouth of Mr. Bell and put therein an old much-used pipe stem. Although his friends could see nothing of the kind, it would call Mrs. Bell by her given name, would drop grapes and hazelnuts into her hand, would crack the nuts, place the kernel in her hand, and drop the wet hulls upon the floor, looking as if they had been moistened by being cracked in the mouth, and all the time the witch was invisible. It has been known to take a cup of coffee out of Mrs. Bell's hand, turn it up as if drinking from it, when the coffee would disappear, but the cup be replaced without any having fallen upon the floor. At times when the family and friends would be sitting round the fire, nuts and acorns would fall on the hearth, coming apparently from the flue of the chimney, but when anyone would endeavor to pick them up, they could not be found. On one occasion a large dinner pot rolled down and out into the floor and then disappeared, leaving not a greasy spot. At one time a vial of poison was found in the flue of the chimney, and being taken down, Dr. George B. Hobson gave 1 drop to a cat, causing its death in 7 seconds. The witch claimed to have put the poison there for the purpose of killing Mr. Bell. Being asked how it was going to administer the poison, it said by pouring it into the dinner pot, although he enjoyed good health up to the time of this event. Mr. Bell died within days after the vial was found, being in a stupor at the time of his death. From this time, the people visited the house less frequently, although the witch would now and then be heard after Mrs. Bell's death. The house was unoccupied, no one being willing to live in it. It was not long afterward pulled down and the logs and other material removed. The barns, stables, and all other buildings were likewise removed, and the well filled up, leaving the apple orchard and a sycamore tree, which stood in the yard to mark the spot where the Bell family once lived. William Hawkins, who came to see it, entered the house when it was literally full of people. As he came, the witch said, "There comes Bill Hawkins, who killed a horse today." It was true that he had that evening shot an old horse that had annoyed him for a long time by jumping into his fields, as Mr. Hawkins acknowledged at the time. The foregoing is related by F. E. Miles, William Pride, W. J. Gooch, Ben B. Batts, and many others. The witch could bark and lap like a dog, buzz like a swarm of bees, cackle like chickens, crow like a rooster, gobble and yelp like a turkey, quack like a duck, and imitate other animals. It could sing, preach, and pray, and do many things to astonish the bystanders. One might rest an open penknife on his knee point up, and the witch would slap down on the knee, making a noise audible anywhere in the room. A neighbor woman, known to a number of living witnesses, having spoken in a crabbed, disrespectful manner of the said witch, had become indignant toward her and proceeded to punish her by simply turning her dress over her head, twisting the same about as one would twist a meal or cum sack, and apparently holding it with one hand, while it administered a severe chastisement by slapping her with the other open hand. The black marks were visible upon her arms and shoulders. This was told me by a gentleman of well-known veracity, who saw the marks himself. Another remarkable attribute of the witch was that it could be at 3 or more places distant from each other, 2 miles or more, at the same time, sorju, as evidenced by talking and otherwise making a noise by scratching on the beds, or pulling off the coverlets or quilts. It shook hands with several men upon one occasion, when one of the men made an effort to hold the hand of the witch and called for a light. Before the light could be brought, the witch wrenched its hand from the man. The witch was angry at this act of impertinence and cursed and abused the man severely, and never afterwards had any confidence in him. The man said he could feel the hand of the witch in his, but could neither see nor feel any arm round or about it. It has been known to throw rocks at people, to appear as a bear, rabbit, and black dog, and in sundry other forms and characters. It called itself by 3 different names, to wit, Three Waters, Tinapurty, and Black Dog.
The article presents more classic poltergeist phenomenon than earlier accounts, such as scratching noises, blankets being pulled from beds at night, opening doors causing items to appear out thin air, which seemed to follow. It also displayed clairvoyance, showing the ability to tell the secrets goings-on in a 7-mile radius around the house. A part of the article that could easily be overlooked is that those present would know what the phenomenon was about to occur, as it would begin with the sound of tree branch hitting the roof that dropped to the second floor rafters, and then the main floor with the sound of a large man. The Bell Witch was also mentioned in Goodspeed Brothers' 1886 History of Tennessee, which said,
"A remarkable occurrence, which attracted widespread interest, was connected with the family of John Bell, who settled near what is now Adams Station about 1804. So great was the excitement that people came from hundreds of miles around to witness the manifestations of what was popularly known as the Bell Witch. This witch was supposed to be some spiritual being having the voice and attributes of a woman. It was invisible to the eye, yet it would hold conversation and even shake hands with certain individuals. The freaks it performed were wonderful, and seemingly designed to annoy the family. It would take the sugar from the bowls, spill the milk, take the quilts from the beds, slap and pinch the children, and then laugh at the discomfiture of its victims. At first it was supposed to be a good spirit, but its subsequent acts, together with the curses with which it supplemented its remarks, proved the contrary. A volume might be written concerning the performances of this wonderful being, as they are now described by contemporaries and their descendants. That all this actually occurred will not be disputed, nor will a rational explanation be attempted. It is merely introduced as an example of superstition strong in the minds of all but a few in those times, and not yet wholly extinct.
In 1894, Clarksville Leaf Chronicle newspaper editor Martin Van Buren Ingram published the book Authenticated History of the Bell Witch after interviewing people about the phenomenon with John Allen Gunn. Included in the book was a 90-page diary called Our Family Trouble, allegedly by Jack's grandson, Tennessee State Representative James Allen Bell, allegedly composed by his father Richard Williams Bell. But the diary and its contents seem to have been the invention of Ingram. Much of the folklore surrounding the phenomenon is based on this fictional diary, including President Andrew Jackson's supposed encounter with her while visiting the county, and that the voice predicted the Civil War.